Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Honorable Federal Minister for Defense, Honorable Federal Minister for Climate Change, Honorable Federal Minister for the Information and the Broadcasting, uh, distinguished defense leadership, respected chair, excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. At the outset, may I request to please display the presentation which I shared with the organizers? Yeah. So let me be clear. This is not going to be an engineering briefing alone. It is the first institutional statement after the inaugural and the keynote address. My purpose is to place the treaty's operating record before this forum. The Indus Waters Treaty is a conflict prevention system, whereas the Permanent Indus Commission is the mechanism that keeps that system alive. Next, please. Ladies and gentlemen, I will not duplicate the political keynote, the legal analysis, the humanitarian assessment, or the security discussion for that matter that will follow. My role is narrower, but essential. I'll place before this forum the operating record of the treaty, what the treaty requires, what Pakistan has done, and what happens when the routine channels are blocked. This is where the principle meets the practice. Next, please. For Pakistan, this is national security, not merely the hydrology. Flow predictability is not, ladies and gentlemen, a luxury of planning. It is part of the survival architecture of the state. When the lives and livelihoods of 240 million people are tied to the Indus Basin, when more than 80% of the arable land depends on these waters, which constitutes around 45 million acres of land, which is being irrigated by the canal waters, and that is a promise the state makes with the farmers. When agriculture contributes almost a quarter of GDP and one-third of the employment, water uncertainty becomes the national uncertainty. Pakistan's restraint has been deliberate, but water, food, livelihood, and social stability are not negotiable abstractions. That is why Pakistan has publicly defined the strategic threshold for any attempt to stop or divert the treaty waters belonging to Pakistan. Next, please. The treaty converted a territorial river system into a legal architecture by way of limiting, fixing and delimiting the rights and obligations of the parties owed to each other. The eastern rivers were, so we all know, allocated to India, whereas the western rivers, the Indus, the Jhelum, and the Chenab, were placed under the general rule of Pakistan's unrestricted use, with India's uses confined to carefully defined exceptions. Pakistan accepted that bargain, rebuilt its irrigation life around that bargain. That is very important. And planned its national water economy on the assurance that the western rivers would be let flow. The bargain remains the bargain. It was not a favor, it was a binding settlement, binding on both the parties. Next, please. You can see on the screen that how this treaty serves as a conflict prevention design. Ladies and gentlemen, the treaty is basically engineering for peace, which works because the four elements operate together: the allocation, the cooperation, the institution, and the dispute control. Allocation tells each side that what it may use and what it may not use. Cooperation provides data, notice, and inspection. And the Commission gives a regular channel of communication, whereas the Article 9 gives a safety valve when questions cannot be settled bilaterally. You just remove one element and the peace function starts to fail. Therefore, the abeyance is not a diplomatic slogan. We need to understand that it is an attempt to disable the stabilizing architecture. Next, please. Next. Now I would come to the Article 8 of the total 12 articles of the treaty, which makes the Commission, the Permanent Indus Commission, the treaty's early warning system. Ladies and gentlemen, it is not a mailbox or a post office. It is, in fact, the operating mechanism that keeps water out of conflict. The Commission converts suspicion into data, and data into verification, and verification into the settlements. Regular meetings, tours, project information, Article 6 data, special inspections, and the annual reports are not merely the rituals or formalities, they are the treaty's first safety device. When the Commission is blocked, consequently, the first stage of dispute avoidance is blocked.